Kum Lenin Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is daf Samach Omid Aleph and Omid Beis. Actually, it's not. We're up to daf Samach Aleph. Good? Yeah, exactly. We're up to Samach Aleph. Now, the last thing we learned was we had a discussion. We're talking about fire, and we're talking about tamun. If the fire burned something that was concealed, wasn't there exposed. So Rabbi Yehuda says Oy HaKama. Chacham says Oy HaKama. It has to be something exposed. So if something is hidden underneath a pile, you're not responsible for it. Rabbi Yehuda says it's chai for everything, and he used that kama to teach you, living balei chaim and other things as well. So we digressed, and we segued into a story about David HaMelech and we had three opinions as to what David HaMelech wanted to know from the Bezdin, and we had the three Gibborim who went out to find out. One of them was simply that question: Tamun be'esh, is he responsible or not? But the other two were different ones. One was, is he allowed to? If they were plishtim hiding in somebody's pile of grains, is he allowed to burn it down? Is he allowed to save himself with a mamash al chaveda? The way Taisus and most are trying to learn, except Rashi, that the question was, of course, you're allowed to save yourself from pikuach nefesh is deicha kol kula, but the question is, do I have to pay for it or not? Is it like a mitzvah that he's doing, and if I don't have to pay him, reimburse that farmer for that pile or not? The other version was that no, that the question is, are you allowed to use the pile from the yid, which was basically barley, which is very cheap, and pay him back with a pile that belonged to the plishtim, which would be lentils? The question is, can you do that? So now the Gemara wants to know. We're we're working our way through, because there are two psukim. One of the Rayam, when Shmuel talks about whether it was barley or lentils. The Gemara says here, the very end was that David HaMelech, because it's all talking in an allegory, David HaMelech refused to drink the water. No, he didn't want to follow the psak. And we're trying to understand, why didn't he follow the psak? He wanted to know what the halach is, and then we found out he decided he doesn't want it. Why did not? So the Gemara says like this. Three lines on the top of the page of Samachala. The one that says there was these two questions, whether he can burn down the person's granary, and basically the Bezin came back to him and said, you're not allowed to. They said, you're not allowed to save yourself with the mamash chaveda, but since you're a king, you can do whatever you want. Okay, I understand why he didn't want to follow. He didn't want to take advantage of the fact that he was a king, because really there's an Isser involved, so he didn't want to do that. The last two cases, whether he can burn down the grains and kill the police using someone else's money, or using someone else's money and then swapping it and paying them back with lentils. He didn't want to drink it, didn't want to follow the psak din. Amari said, Kivan the Ike Suda, because there's an Isser involved, I'm not happy. But one who says that the whole question was whether he's allowed, whether if you're responsible, if your things hidden there. So why didn't he want to? He wanted to know halacha, and they told him the halacha is whatever they told him. We don't know. Is my law of why do you want to follow halacha? So he must say, of course he followed halacha. You know what he didn't want to drink it? He didn't want to say the names of these three gebayim. Amari said, this is what I heard from the Bezdin of Shmuel. The David HaMelech was saying, Kol hamoiser atzmai lamus al divrei Torah. We're up to Samach Aleph, about 7-8 lines on the top of the page, and we're trying to understand why David HaMelech refused to take on the final decision from the Bezdin. So we explained, if it's the case where he asked, can we burn down the pile of grains where the plishtim are hiding, and I'm using someone else's money, so they told him you're not allowed to, but in other words, you have to pay for it, but as a king you can do whatever you want. So he didn't want to follow that thing. He didn't want to take advantage of that, or didn't want, because there's an issue involved. Or according to the other one, that we're gonna ruin whatever, we're gonna burn the guy's grain, but we're gonna pay barley, but we're gonna pay him back with lentils, which is worth a lot more. It's a lot more valuable. And they told me you're not allowed to, but as a king you can. Okay, again we can understand it. But if all it was the first version, which was a question of whether it was tamun, do you have to pay if something was hidden when I lit a fire and I traveled next door and it burnt down things which were hidden? Do I have to pay for it or not? And the Bezdin made a ruling, which whatever the ruling was, you didn't want to listen to it. So we answer about 5 lines above the Mishnah So he answered, I heard from the Bezin of Shmuel Aramasi, Kol HaMoiser Atzmed Lamed Torah. If you put your life on the line for the words of the Torah, Ein Eimin Dvar Halacha Mishmai. We won't say halacha in your name. Very difficult to understand. Yeah, we had more Avodah Zarah there with Rabbi Chanan Chadron went and gave shiurim in public. Rabbi Kiva gave shiurim in public, put their lives on the line. We have it all the time. What do you mean? So the Chassidus shot is, in that case, you've demonstrated that you are so bottled, subservient to Hashem that we no longer give it your name. We say this is Hashem's Torah. We say that we say this in the name of Klal Yisrael because you don't count yourself as an individual because you don't care about your personal life. All you care about is the Eibish's Torah. So it's actually a compliment. And that's what he's saying here. Louder. Yeah, but that's a stamazeh. But if a person, these three people jeopardized their life. They went into the camp of the police to go to the court to get a psak. So they know they were so dedicated. He felt that I can't give an individual name. This should be given in the name of Klal Yisrael, or the name of. We'll see in a minute. He poured it out before Hashem. What do you mean he poured it out to Hashem? Because it did l'shem Shemaim. We want to know if you're allowed to save yourselves by killing police. You want to know whether he has to pay for Tamei. No big deal. When he poured it out to Hashem, they said it Mishmadi Gemara. He no longer said their name, he said it in the name of Hashem. So you see, it's a compliment actually. Gemara sometimes means the name of all the Tanaim and Amoraim, or Gemara means the name of Torah. This is Torah itself, because these people were so bottled to the Torah, it is Torah itself. Now, even though on top of the page we said that the one who said it was asking for Taman was asking two questions, Taman and one of the other two, but we want to know, it sounds like he didn't listen to any of the decisions. We want to know why didn't he listen to the decision of Taman, as Teja says. Next Mishnah, we're continuing to talk about fire. So we finished talking about the animal, and we finished talking about Ket and Shen and Regel. We finished talking about Boyer, and now we're talking about Eich. The fire traversed a wall that was 4 amas high. You lit a fire in your property, and then the fire traveled and jumped over a wall that was 4 amas high. Or it crossed over a public space. It was a big distance. Or a river. We'll see later that this is a river with Rosh Hashanah is 16 amas wide, like having more area, and a river is 8 amas wide. Pater, in all these cases, you're exonerated because it's like an accident. Says about Tanya and the Bryce. Else we learned over that if it crossed over a fence that's 4 amas high is chayiv. Our Mishnah says clearly a 4 amas fence you are potter, and the Bryce says a 4 amas fence you chayiv. Which one is it? Amar Papa. There's no argument between the two. What does 4 amas mean? 4 amas really in both Mishnah and Bryce read as if it says till 4 amas. And the difference is as follows. Tana Didan, the Tana of Mishnah, not only a 10 amas wall, an 8 amas wall, a 6 amas wall, but even a 4 amas wall, you are potter, sheish amas potter, chamin potter, ad arba amas potter. Till 4 amas, because he in ad bechlal. When he says till 4, he means including 4. 4 amas wall, you're potter. Below 4 amas, then your chayv should have anticipated there's a possibility for the fire to jump over the wall. But 4 amas and greater, you are potter. So when it says 4 amas, it means ad until and ad bechlal. Tana bra, but the Tana of the Bryce says malamatzal. He's talking about chiyuvim. Not only 1 amma high wall or 2 amma high wall, 3 amma wall, but even a 4 amma high wall. But he says 4 amma means till 4 amas, and he is ad v'loy ad bechlal. Not including the 4 amas, up to 4 amas.
Exactly 4 amas.
Your potters. So there's no argument between the Mishnah and the Bryce. They're talking in different cases, different ways, different perspectives. But Daled amish amru the potter. When we say you are potter, if it's 4 amas wall, I feel it even though the other side of the wall there's a field full of dry and thorns, everything else are very, very, it's susceptible to fire. They can catch fire in a second if even sparks fly over there. If they have a 4 amas wall, you're potter. Amar potter. So we say that a 4 amas wall, we're not talking about from the ground up, because if you have kites in there, if you have thorns and the thorns are piled up, 5 amas high, then they're very easily, can catch on fire. It has to be a gap of 4 amas between the top of the thorns and the wall. And Toshi goes further on the other side as well. There has to be 4 amas from the fire. You have a bonfire there. If your bonfire is higher than the wall, who cares if the wall is 4 amas high? The fire is above the wall. You're talking about that there's a gap of 4 amas between the top of your fire and the wall. We're talking about the fire. When do we say this at a wall? I'm talking about the fire is straight up. It's a vertical fire. So therefore, in order for it to go over a wall, it has to jump, and it won't jump over a fire or a wall of 4 amas. And Rashi has two pshatim in the. One is that it's also a vertical fire, but there's a wind, so it's going on an angle. And because it's going on an angle, therefore it travels sideways. And that's when then a 4 amos wall is not enough. I feel like even to 100, because it can jump. Since the wind is blowing it and fanning it, and it's going sideways, it's not a vertical wall, then it can go jump over any wall, as we saw with the big fires here in Australia, how it can jumps over, all heights, all distances. And another pshat in Rashi is nechfes mean that it's actually crawling on the ground. You have very low fire, and it's crawling. And if it's crawling, then we're not talking about the wall, we're talking about the distance. Because the Mishnah also said if there's a certain distance between the two, then you're not responsible. But if it's a low fire that is traveling, horizontally, then no matter how far, even 100 mil, you are responsible. The fire travels. Shmuel says no. When do we have these rules? Only if it's nichfefes, when it's on a side or if it's crawling on the ground. If it's a vertical fire, it doesn't jump at all. Not for the kosher potter. And even if the wall is one amma, you are exempt, you're exonerated because it doesn't jump. Tanya goes to Rabbi I met Rabbi Kalacha when it's a vertical wall. If it's a wall that the wind is blowing, or that it's a low wall, a grass fire like the 80 mitzvah, and there's wood there. I feel like even 100 million chayv if it travels.
You have the fuel there next to the fire.
Exactly, and if it's traveling this way, there's no limit. Over the north, this Brisa says it crosses a river, and we'll talk about it in a minute. Or a pile of water. So when it comes to a public street, it's 16 amos. When it comes to a river, it's 8 amos. Derech harabim, but first of all, the Mishnah says if it crosses a derech harabim, you are part. Derech harabim, shus harabim, we rail the nerve in 16 amos wide. Man Tana, who holds that 16 amos? Amar Rabbi Lezi. It's Rabbi Lezi that we learn in the Mishnah soon. It's now we learned Rabbi Lezi. Sheish esse amma kederech shus harabim. He said if there's a distance of 16 amos, a road between your property and whatever's across, you are potter, because we don't think the fire could jump over that. Oinor of a river. Now, what's a river? Rav says, nor mamish, a river. It has to be a river, then we allow, then if it's 8 amos, if the river is wider, like a creek or something, it's wider than 8 amos, then you are potter. Less than that, we say the fire is very easy to jump over. Shmuel says, Arisa de Daloi. We had this a few days ago where Rashi says Arisa de Daloi is an irrigation canal, and Rashi told us that's what Amasa Mayim is. It's an amma wide and amma deep. So Amas is the word Amasamayim is from the word Amma, which is an Amma wine, Amma deep. And Rashi actually says there that Lisa the Deloy he teaches as an Amasamayim. Not everyone agrees with Rashi, but that's what Rashi says. Nor is describing an area. We don't need water in there, even if dry in the season. Let's say when it dries in the summer, it's still why? Because it's deep. It's not like a normal road which is level to your property. This is a deep terrain, so therefore you are potter if it's 8 amos wide. Which is what he calls Shmuel. Because it's much less. It's only 6 tefachim wide. It's only an amma wide. It has to have water in it to stop the fire from traveling. Only if it has water in it. Otherwise, no problem. Otherwise, sorry. Only if water in it do we say that you're potter, but if there's no water in it, you're chayiv. Can be learned something similar? But if you have a field, but your field is divided by these what do you call tributaries? What do you call these little canals? It separates them into separate fields, and each field requires its own pay. A pay is when you have to leave the corner for the poor people. Each field has their own. And what are they? Hanachal, a river, v'hashlulis. We'll see the shlulis. The derech hayachid, a private road, which is only 4 amos wide, and derech harabim, a public road. My shlulis. What is the shlulis? I want to read Mishmul. I've used it, we had it before as well. I've used it in Mishmul. Mokim shemek shamim shon, like a pond, a puddle where rainwater collects. Amas hamayim. It's an amas hamayim shechalekes shol lakfer. That it literally means shemechalekes, it distributes sholol the plunder lakfer to its banks. Its banks, and Rashi says an example that it's an irrigation pipe, an irrigation canal, and it makes fruits. That's like the booty. That's like the plunder, and this is what they normally have: is the width of a masamayim. Yeah. Says the Gemara, the one who says that make Shamim. And Shmuel therefore argues and he says Shlulis cannot mean a masamayim because he said before that nor means Arisa de Daloy, and Rashi says Arisa Loy is a masamayim. So nor is a masamayim and then Shlul is a masamayim, can't be. Therefore he learned Shlulis must be something else. It's a puddle of water. Rain collects rainwater. But Abibis and everything, no, it's a masamayim.
That's draw water.
Yep, so but Rashi told before that what is that? That's the same thing as a masamayim. So when Shmuel said that the word nor means Arisa Deloy, so therefore, which according to him is a Masamayim. So when it comes over here and it says by Peah, Shululis, it must be that, and so on, it must be something else. We're rainwater power of the kosh, which is deeper and so mandam a masamayim. Only a masamayim separates the fire, and you're exempt. What comes to pay over here, we talk about when it comes to just a puddle of water, it's not included because it's temporary and it's less. The hanu. But Agni the Adam Mikres, consider as if it's part of the wings of the ground. It's part of the ground. If you have areas which are sort of it's like pushed in or pressed in, and their water collects rainwater, temporarily when it's after big rain, there's a puddle of water that's not considered a river or something that separates the property. That is part of the property. Every property has area which are indented and it collects. So the Mishnah. Now, there's two kinds of fires we're going to see. There's a fire you light in your own property and travels across, and there's a fire you light next door. And we're going to see that it has a bearing on this argument we had before about tamun be'esh, things which are concealed by fire. So there's the Mishnah. If you light a fire in your own property, at kama tavadlika, how far do we hold you responsible? That if the fire continues so much, it's still your fire. We give you an allot, an area of a base kur, and in other words, you go a half a kur. Kur is 30 saw. So we have, I remember a saw is 50 by 50, so 7,500 amas is 30 saw, and you divide that in half. You square it, and you're in right in the center, and half each direction. So you're in the middle of the base kur, and if it goes beyond that, you're not responsible. That's what, and we're talking about over here. As Rashi said, we're talking about over here is when it's a kalachas, when it's a vertical fire. But if it's a nechfefes, which is the fire we said like a grass fire, if we said before it travels 100 mil, there's no limit. So then, but that's not what we're talking about over here. We're talking about this vertical fire. That's straight up. We give you 16 numbers like this vertical fire. And Abba Kiva says, Chamishim Amma, give you 50 amas. And Abba Shimon says, Shalom, Yishalom, Amavas, Avoda, Hakoy Lefi Adlika. You're always responsible. Sounds like from Abba Shimon's way we understood right now. He holds you always responsible. I don't care how far it goes. I don't care what kind of fire it is. You're always responsible. No, but see in a minute. Right now, the Gemara thinks that Hakoy Adlika means if according to the one who lit the fire, you lit the fire, and then it traveled, you're safe. Doesn't matter what distance it is. You're driving an ass. The less Rav Shimon sure, but like Rav Shimon doesn't hold that sometimes you're not responsible. It's not your fault at all. But Tanan, we learned clearly. We're going to have this in Babasa, the different rules how neighbors are supposed to behave together. According to Rashi, we're talking about that the people in the city have a right to stop you. Remember, in those days, they were all wooden houses, wooden huts. If one house catches on fire, it posed a danger to the entire village. So the members of the city have a right to intervene and say, hey, you can't have that in your house because it's a danger to all of us. Others say we're talking about the neighbors, the upstairs neighbor. So, Tanner is an oven, a big oven. It's very, very hot to get wood burning there. You shouldn't place it in the house. You need a gap, a space. Above it, Dalit Amos. Like today, we have all these rules in restaurants. You know how much space you have to have between the stove and the wall, the back wall. You have to have a fan, and for safety reasons. So over there also, you need to have a gap of 4 amas between the top of the oven and the ceiling. What about if you're upstairs and you want to have this kind of an oven? You need to make sure that underneath that oven, there's plaster, 3 tvachim thick, so it doesn't in any way, the heat and everything else burn its way through. Ubekida stove, which obviously is a lot less, has a lot less heat, like we learned in the laws of Shabbos. A tanner is a square box, and you have it very, very hot. Yeah, exactly. Actually, a tanner, I know that tanner was like a cylinder.
like a cabinet, it's like a
Yeah.
dome.
That's right. So we had a kida is a straight box with two spaces. A koipach is a square box, which is one hole. So because there's a hole, it sort of lets the heat escape a little bit. And the tanner was that it gets narrower and narrower, so the heat becomes very, very intense inside. And always like in a hibachi grill, where the heat heats up very, very quickly because it's very strained.
In the Middle East, or some parts there, they still call it a tandoor, which is an oven that's
Sits on the ground.
shaped. It's like a dome shape.
Okay. So under the ground, like we used to have in those days, or no?
Some do it underground, yeah.
Okay. So ubikida tefach, we allow a tefach underneath. The im hizik. At the end of the day, if you cause damage, mishalam hizik. You cause damage, you have to pay for the damage. Sounds like even if you follow these rules, nevertheless, if you cause damage, you have to pay. Because by an oven, even though generally we say if you follow the rules, if you follow a prescription and something happens, you're exempt, you're exonerated. But by an oven, because it's this fire, constant fire, even with our rules, you have to be vigilant and watch, see what's going on there. You can't just rely on the rule, and therefore you're responsible. Rav Shimon says, Shimon said, no, you know why we have these rules? Because if you follow the rules, you follow the scripture, you're potter. So Shimon agrees if you follow the rules, you're potter. What do you mean the Mishnah says by fire, no matter what happens, you're responsible? He's saying there's no standard rule when it comes to fire. We have to measure what kind of fire did you have, and was there a trail of thorns all the way to the next door property? In other words, every case has to be judged on its merits. Not that you're responsible always, but there's no rules you have to follow and see because each case might be different. And was it very windy at the time? So many different variables you have to look into. There's no real, open-ended rules. You have to follow each case separate. Says the Mishnah. Now, this is the Mishnah we talked about till now, the Samachal, about Tamun Be'esh. We had it from the beginning of the Masechta, Tamun Be'esh. You light a fire and it travels across and burns somebody's, let's say, pile of wheat, and you had hidden under the pile of wheat all your money and everything else, and burned all your money. I'm not responsible. Says the Gemara, according to that Chacham, you are. Hamadi is like God. Somebody lights a pile of grain. Well, you buy kalim and buried in there, you hid your stored different vessels with the and you caught on fire. How much of that? You got to pay for everything. You cause the damage, you got to pay. You only pay for whatever the pile was. It was wheat, you paid for the wheat, barley. You had things hidden there, not worried about it. Next case we had before as well in the Gemara. What happens? This we had the argument of about fire. If fire is considered your arrow, it's like as if you did it directly, or is it just your possessions? So we had the following: we had a goat tied to the granary, the evet and an evet standing there. The Nisivi Moshe burnt the granary down. We have to pay for that. The goat couldn't run away, so you have to pay for that. And the evet, even though you died, and normally you get killed for killing the evet, he could have walked away. But who asked him to be so loyal to stand next to the goat? So therefore, chayiv yechayiv for everything except for the evet. What about Evet Kofus Loy? The Evet was tied down. You couldn't escape. So that was murder. You killed an Evet. With the din is that it's a capital crime. You get punished for it. And so then we have a rule of Kam Rabbanan. The Gidi Samachloy and the goat was standing next to it. Venisiv got burnt. Potter, you are Potter. You are Potter. There's an argument. There's two pshat in Rashi. So you're Potter from everything because Kam Leimed the Rabba Benay. Kam Leimed the Rabba Benay. So therefore. Yeah, your chaim is with the evet, so therefore you potter. And even if there were no warnings, we really learned from Tanda V'Chizkiya that if you did chayav and misa shegin, even though you won't get killed for it, the fact that you committed an act that normally deserves misa, you're already potter from paying mammon. You're a potter. Now, when it comes to the goat, the first Rashi is we don't care if the goat is tied or not tied. It's just because we mentioned the evet tied before, we mentioned the goat tied. Others say that you only potted because if the goat was untied, so it should have run away. And this is how you read the Mishnah. If there was an evet tied there, or if the goat was next to it, you are potter because the goat should have ran away. But if the goat was tied down, are you responsible? The other people hold no, that a goat, even if it's not tied down, if forget about that, let's say there's no evidence, just a goat. If there's a goat standing next to the granary and got killed with the granary, one opinion Rashi is the potter, if it's not tied down, the goat should have ran away. The other opinion Rashi is no, the goat is not clever enough to run away, and therefore you are responsible. Yeah. Further, Mishnah further. If you burn somebody's house down, large house, like a mansion, and there in a mansion you have a lot of stuff in there. It's not like in the olden days these have small houses. They keep all their wares out in the chutzah in the courtyard. But if you have a big house, we learn about Master what the definition of a big house is. It'll be smaller than your bathroom. But if you had a big house, mishalem kol masha b'toicha, you have to pay for whatever is in there because it's common. You know that people keep wallets there, money there, and all these other things. Okay? People leave these things in their houses, so you can't say it's like hidden. You know that's what people keep and store in their houses. The whole machlekes of Rabbi Yehuda Chacham is a madli b'toishala. You lit the fire in your own place, and then it traveled to your next door. Rabbi Yehuda says you chayv on this kitam. Rabbi Yehuda hold in this case, you're still responsible for even things which are tamun because it says oi to include tamun. And Abban Patim, look, since you lit the fire in your own place, and the pasuk is talking about you say to age means the fire left your place and traveled on. So that's when the pasuk is talking about the chum and say kama, only if it's visible, not if it's tamun, if it's hidden. But if you went to your friend's house, property, and you set the fire there, and you lit the fire, then you have to pay everything. Because the pasuk is not talking about that. The pasuk is talking about when you lit fire in your own property. But if you lit the fire in the other person's property, going to everybody, you're chayv. So, Tony, say if you're right, why does the end of the Mishnah say Moedim Chacham Rabbi Yehuda? When are the Chacham Moedim Rabbi Yehuda the Madli gets if you live in this big house that you're responsible, say but they hold that even Tamun you're chayiv in the very same field if you lit it in your friend's house. If you went and you lit a fire in your friend's house, Moedim Chacham in Rabbi Yehuda that Tamun you're chayiv in your friend's house. Can the other only about him? Leaf like we listen to today. Why don't we talk about this very in of Tamun? Only if you live in your own property. You pay. Why don't you make that difference as well? Teish already asked, what's the difference? Which difference? There's two differences there, so we chose one of them. Well, you can say that this here we're talking about Tamun. In the Bida, there's no Tamun because everything you have, this is your house. Everything in the house, you know where everything is. There's no tamun, and you know that people put things in the house. Here, it's the same case of tamun.
Don't expect the guy
exactly.
Treasures in his haystack.
Exactly, and within that, we want to say that a bigger chiddush comes sometimes if you went next door and you set this place on fire. Ella says, Rabbi betarti pligi. I say they're arguing in two cases. There's two arguments here. One is if you light your own property, and one is if you light next door. It goes as follows. The madlik b'toshla, you lit your own property, and then it traveled to your next door. That you the whole you chayv tamun. You're not chayv tamun beish. Okay, that's what we learned till now. Rabban hold that if it's hidden and you set the fire, you lit the fire in your own property and it traveled across to your neighbor and it burnt down in a pile of grains and there was things hidden inside, a wall, whatever it is, your potter could have been the chayv. But there's another argument. You went to your friend's property and you set it on a fire. You set it alight. Anything that you chayv. Even if it's a wallet, something which is totally, doesn't out of place. And the Rabban hold no. We also agree that there are things that you're responsible for, but only things which are normal to keep in the field. For example, things that people normally hide. It's hidden. But since it's normal, you're going, and the pasuk is not talking about that. So going marigin, the clay bucker, the tools you use for plowing, and so on, and clay bucker and the things that you use for for the animals, hudim mishalem. Or the kelim shein that will happen begodish, like a wallet, loy mishalem, you don't pay. So the B'teish learns if you set light in your own property, Rabbi Yehuda holds yichai for everything, even things which are totally out of place. Yichai for everything, and the Chacham hold yichai for nothing if it's hidden. If it's a moedim, if you go to your friend's property, since the pasuk is not talking about that, so things which are normal there to be stored over there, even though it's hidden, it's not exposed, you're responsible for. Things which are not normal to be like a wallet, you're not responsible for it. You're responsible for everything. So let me learn. Hamadlik es hagodish. If somebody lights a pile, oh, you buy kalim. There were kalim there. The lucky and you lit it. Rabbi Yehuda and Mishalem Kosher Rabbi Yehuda hold you chai for everything. And the Chacham say, "Ein a Mishalem Ella." You only pay Godish the following four cases. Godish shall chit. I'm sorry, Godish shall chitin if it's a pile of wheat, or Godish shall sa'idin or a pile of barley. The royin. So right now we're talking about you lit it in your own place and travel across. But this is more interesting. The royin. So now let's say this pile of wheat had a whole bunch of pots and pans hidden in the bottom. So they took up space. It could have been wheat there, but there's kalim there. So Rabbanan say not the pshat is you only pay for the quantity of wheat that was there and you're totally potter because of for the kalim. You talk a potter for the kalim, but we imagine that volume, that the space that the kalim occupied is made up of wheat because that's what you thought was the only wheat. Pay for that at least in the value to the value of wheat. The roy in mokum kalim ilu. We imagine that the space that the kalim took up is made up of whatever the true is of that. Yeah, so this is talking about that you lit it in your own property, but whole chavod and then it traveled across. But if you went there instead of a light, you pay for whatever was inside there. Pay for everything inside there. And according to Rava, according to Rav Kahana, you pay for everything that are totally major to Rav Yehuda. According to Rava, only for things which darken to hide. Yeah, like Morigin and Clay Bucker, those kind of things. Now the Gemara says, the Braisa says, Rabbi Yehuda will be made to the Chachamim in the following case. The Marshal Mokal Chaveri, I allowed you to use my space, my farm, lahagdish gadish, pile some of your teruah, your grains, okay, the hegdish v'hitmin. If you came in, I gave permission to put in A, and you went in and you put in A, but you also hid some things there. I took responsibility only to make sure that you're whatever I gave you permission for. But what you hid there, I never gave permission, so I'm not responsible. And Rabbi Yehuda is made in this particular case.
Even if it's guilty.
Yeah, and I could never even want to give why because it's my property and I'm the one who lit it, and I only took responsibility for. Yeah, I told you I'm allowing you to put your grains there. For example, if I gave permission in case number one, I gave you permission to pile of wheat. They just said you put in the barley, right? You put in the barley. So what about in this case here? Or I have to pay you only then for barley. Because I pay, even though I gave permission to put wheat is cost double barley, but the fact is you put in barley there and I burnt it down, so I'm responsible to pay for barley, which is so obvious. Why should I pay you for wheat if you only had barley there? Maybe the chiddush is I gotta even pay you for barley because I never gave permission to put in barley there. I only gave permission to put in wheat, and you put in barley. Maybe the chiddush is, but I'm still responsible if I burnt it down. So I gave permission to put in barley. The hegdish chitin, and what you put in there was wheat, and then I burnt it down. I only have to pay you the price of barley. That's a chiddush already. The fact is, you put in the wheat. The chiddush is I only gave you permission. I only took upon myself to protect your barley. That's all I'm paying you for. Case number 3. Chitin, I gave you permission for wheat. The chifin beside it, you put the wheat in there, but then you cover it with barley. So I thought, what do you have there? Pile of barley. So I wasn't so careful because barley is Michael Behema. You know, doesn't have much value. So if I lit a fire in my own backyard and burnt your barley down, which really was made up of wheat, you just covered the barley for whatever reason. I in hurry, you don't want people to see so much wheat. I don't have to pay you for the wheat because I took responsibility for wheat. I would have been very careful, but when I saw you had barley there, and I assumed that the entire pile was made up of barley, so I wasn't careful, so I'm liable just for barley. The last case, so I gave you permission for barley, and you covered it with wheat. It doesn't matter. I only gave you permission for barley, so therefore I have to pay for barley. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow. We have other cases similar to that.